Welcome to the Own Your Best Life podcast. I'm May Emson, your host, leadership and mindset coach. Here, we talk all things spiritual, mindset, business, leadership, and wellness for the modern seeker who wants to align their life with purpose and inspiration. We'll cover career changes, stress management, meditation, energy, intuition, and more. Each episode holds spiritual and practical tools to help you live a life of your wildest dreams without getting burnt out along the way. Ready to live a life on your own terms? This is the Own Your Best Life podcast. Welcome, friends, to episode number 87 of the Own Your Best Life podcast. So sometimes we have these events that happen in our lives and they shake everything up. And this is what happened with today's guest, Laila Tarraf. She is a talent management and leadership development executive with over 25 years of experience building teams and advising companies across many industries and stages of growth. She was a founding member of Walmart.com at the height of the first internet bubble and the chief people officer at Peet's Coffee and Tea as it was redefining its values as a national brand. She then spent 7 years working in private equity as the director of human capital at GI Partners and a human capital advisor with Altamont Capital. Currently, as the chief people officer for Allbirds, she's focused on building a high-performance, human-centered organization capable of driving for results, while at the same time nurturing a culture of connection and belonging as it grows into a global, sustainable consumer brand alongside a global pandemic and broad social unrest. And over the years, through professional achievements, personal accomplishments, alongside some professional setbacks and personal tragedies, Laila has evolved her leadership, her life philosophy, into one that embraces the inherent duality of life, balancing courage with compassion, integrating head with heart, infusing power with tenderness. And her journey and hard-won insights are what she shares in her debut book, Strong Like Water. She is a graduate of the Berkeley Haas School of Business and is also a guest lecturer at Berkeley Law School. She is Lebanese and American, an avid traveler and world explorer, and a proud mom to her teenage daughter, Nadia, and her 8-pound Yorkie, Max. I know you're going to love today's conversation. Her breakdowns have led to her healing, her waking up, learning who she really was at her core, and finding that different kind of balance. So listen in to our conversation today to find out more about her story and how we can bring more of ourselves to work. We are so excited to have Laila on here. I was put in touch with you, Laila, through a client of mine, Kim Kennedy, who noticed some similarities between our backgrounds, some of our common interests, specifically quotes and readings by Lao Tzu, and decided we would be a good fit. So she shared with me on my birthday, she gifted me your book, Strong Like Water. And I remember just standing there as I received the Amazon package and being really touched. And then I just stopped and I probably stood for like maybe 30 minutes because I just started reading and it was hard to put down because it is that compelling. So I don't know all the things that brought us together, but I have a feeling that there was a reason. And I think that your story is going to be something that a lot of people resonate with, especially your journey through your personal life and how your personal life and your work life started to collide in ways that felt very tragic, but also were really, really beautiful. So I'm so excited to be able to have these conversations with you. I think as most people will start to realize, you don't have to be only one thing versus the other. Laila is a beautiful example of a corporate warrior and also someone who is deeply spiritual and has kind of awakened to this newfound meaning and purpose and joy in her life as well. So I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, May. Wow. What an introduction. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah. And I think that for the listeners, I think it'd be helpful to kind of share a little bit about you, your path in terms of climbing that corporate ladder and also writing this book. And you can, maybe share a little bit about what you're doing now, because I think that will be exciting and helpful.
Sure. So my undergrad was in computer information systems, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I remember a professor said, this was in the mid 80s, like, oh, computers, that's the way of the world. And I thought, well, I'm going to go where the world's going. And I learned how to be a programmer, like COBOL and Fortran. And I always say, if I was 10 years younger, I would have stayed in technology. Back then, it was just these big mainframes in the back office, and that just didn't feel right to me. So then I ended up really falling into recruiting. And because I had a technical background, I was recruiting engineers, and I was in Silicon Valley. And so that was a lucrative career in my early 20s. But I knew that I wanted something beyond recruiting. And so I went back to business school at Haas at Berkeley. And coming out of business school in 1998, that was really when the first internet bubble was just, growing. And I immediately started having opportunities, in all these internet companies. A few that are not, Webvan. I don't know if you remember Webvan. That was the first sort of big poster child for the first internet bubble, where it got really big and then it imploded. And but because of the 6 months that I had with Webvan, which was the service to deliver groceries to your home 22 years ago, way before its time, that made me an expert in e-commerce. And so I was recruited to go to Walmart.com, the internet division of Walmart, when it was just starting. I was employee number 7 there. It was early 2000. And I was really lucky to report to a female CEO. Her name was Jean Jackson, who was a CEO from Banana Republic and Disney, and really powerful, tough, but gave me the opportunity to move into HR, which I never would have raised my hand for. I was doing I was the director of recruiting, and I was doing all the HR responsibilities because we didn't have a head of HR. I wouldn't have thought to ask for it, typical, right? And finally, after a year, she said, Laila, you're sort of doing the HR job. Why don't you take it? And my initial reaction was, no, I'm not an HR person, because at the time I had this impression that HR people were very administrative and not central to the business. And I didn't see myself in that way.
Yes.
And right.
Yeah, I think that's a common belief, especially with people in the corporate world, this feeling of being like in the business, right? Versus like outside of the business.
Yeah. I mean, maybe I see it differently now because I've been in HR for the last 20 years, but I think especially after a global pandemic and what we're dealing with our employees, and, hybrid flexible work and safety and the Great Resignation. And I mean, if anyone thinks that HR is like some superfluous, side function that you could just throw anybody into, you're not paying attention. I remember reading an article in The Atlantic that said that the CFO was king in a financial crisis, but the CHRO or the CPO is king or queen in a global pandemic.
So true.
And
so
boy, it's
true.
felt that way. It has felt that way. So I did 7 years at Walmart. I really learned HR from the ground up. And then I did 7 years at Peet's Coffee and Tea, which is a local regional coffee company, and it was a public company. So I learned how to work in a public company. And then I did a few years consulting within private equity firms, and now I'm at Allbirds. So I've really grown a lot as an HR professional over the last 20 years. For 3 big operating companies and about 7 years in operating roles with portfolio companies for private equity firms.
So much, right? And then what about the book? How did the book transpire?
Well, there was a period in my life when I was at Peet's, actually, where I had 3 big losses. my husband, my father, and then my mom passed away in the span of a few years. And up until that time, I really hadn't had, any real adversity in my life. And I'd held myself in, my personality was very sunny, very, no problem. I can do it. It's all good. I tucked away things that might have bothered me a little. And I just, even if things weren't fine, I would just pretend that they were. And,
Yeah.
and it's all, and yes, it was a little bit of a ruse, but I didn't think it was a ruse. It's how I held myself, right? At least consciously.
Yeah.
And, when I began to suffer those losses, it was a real wake up call for me. It was very clear I couldn't hold myself in the way I had for the first 40 years of life,
Yeah.
and make it out of those intact, meaning that I had to allow myself to grieve, to fall apart, to break down, so that I could rebuild myself again. And to be honest, I think my daughter was 3 when her father died. And if I hadn't had a young daughter, that it was very clear that I needed to get real and grieve and be there for, I may have tried to muscle through it. I may have tried to intellectualize it, or say, oh, it's okay. Bad things happen to people. This is, look how lucky I've been all my life.
Yeah.
I'm so good at reframing and rationalizing. And when my daughter started to fall apart and need me to be there for her, I didn't have it in me. I didn't know how to do it because I'd never done it for myself. And so that was really the beginning of the journey of me realizing, like, I need to relearn how to feel, because I hadn't allowed myself to feel anything. And that's what happens. You kind of numb yourself out, even to the good stuff, though I don't think I realized that. If you don't allow yourself to feel the bad stuff, you don't feel the good stuff either. So it was a pretty sucky few years there. But I learned a lot, and I came out stronger despite my fear. The reason why I wouldn't allow myself to grieve or to be in despair was because I was worried that if I did, I wouldn't be able to get out of it again. I would lose my strength. I would lose my agency. Like, who would I be if I wasn't this badass getting things done, And I was scared to let go of that persona that I developed, and allow myself to fall apart and be vulnerable, because I didn't know if I'd get back up again. And but you always do. And I'm stronger for it now. And I'm stronger, I think, in a different way. I think before I led with a lot of ferocity and strength. And I realize now that a lot of that was protecting my insides that were not very strong, that were afraid to show themselves. And I think probably people that were more awake at the time probably could see through that. I couldn't, right? Now I think I'm stronger on the inside. I have greater emotional resilience and capacity. And so I don't have to lead with such sort of, ferocity, because I know who I am. I know that I'm strong. So I can actually be more gentle, more tender on the outside. So I appear softer on the outside, but I'm actually stronger on the inside. It's this interesting inverse relationship.
Yeah. It's such a paradox, isn't it? That the things that we think are going to armor us up are actually the ones that keep us from actually getting strong, because we protect it so hard. And I think that
100%.
With your daughter too, it's interesting how, because they are just so childlike, you can't reason. You can't use rational thought and thinking, which is very disturbing at some point. But it allows us to have to practice right?
Yeah.
Accessing emotion and accessing empathy. And a lot of times we can do that for other people, but we can't do it for ourselves in the same way. And I think that
Yeah.
sometimes our kids are that like mirror for us as we experience something. We usually bring back, right, the tactics of muscling through, and then we realize, wait, like
There's another
they,
way.
yeah, they are not taking to this. So maybe there's another way around it, right? And then we end up reparenting ourselves. Right?
I think you're right. If you pay attention, I I was realizing all the time that I was just like my daughter when I was her age, right? Before I had built up these coping mechanisms and these
Yeah.
defenses. And it was this process of re-remembering who we really are at the core in our essence. And if you are able to meet your kids where they are, you realize like, oh, that's how it all starts before you start telling yourself a story and putting on the armor.
Yeah. It's interesting when we talk about these synchronicities, because as I was reading your book, I was just hit with so many of them. And for me, I had a set of 3 losses also
Oh
that
my gosh.
finally, yeah, that were the ones that kind of catapulted me into this coaching work, that had me waking up and suddenly realizing like time was of the essence, and that I wasn't really utilizing, my full potential, which leads obviously to a whole host of questions about how you live your life and what are you doing with your time. And so I wanted to ask you about these idea of breakdowns, because I think that a lot of times we fear failing, we fear messing up, we fear not having these really perfect lives to kind of fall into. But at the same time, it's usually, in many cases, what ends up being the greatest gift. In obviously hindsight, in the moment, it
Yeah.
feels like, the worst thing
Yeah.
in the
Not so
world.
good.
But why do you think, at least for you, why do you think it took like this breakdown in order for you to decide to bring your whole self to work and not just the kind of, armored up and like go
Yeah.
do it version, but the like
Yeah.
feeling version too?
It's such a good question, and it's something I've thought about a lot. There's this saying that no one changes until the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of changing. I just think we don't like to feel uncomfortable, and so
Yeah.
I think it takes something that really rocks our world, an intervention of some sort, where we have no choice but to really something that shakes us out of this narrative that we've developed for ourselves. I think we identify so strongly with how we see ourselves. I call it our story, our narrative, that we don't even think of questioning it until something goes wrong. And then you're like, wait, maybe I haven't been seeing this exactly in the right way. Like, wait, how come I can't sit here and comfort my daughter when she is, grieving and feeling badly? Like, I wanted to crawl out of my skin when Daniel first died. And I'm like, wait, this isn't right. Why am I not able to do this? And so it began a very sort of, slow process of peeling back the layers and unpacking. And I think that's the journey we are all on, right? We armor up in whatever that looks like for us. We tell ourselves a story. We step into this narrative and we think it's who we are, but it's not. It's part of who we are. It's our personality structure, right? But there is something much deeper, much more true, our core essence, and we almost forget about that, right? In my coaching, we talk about re-remembering, and so I think until something rocks your world and you have the courage, or maybe you don't have the option until to fall apart, and then you start that unpacking process, and then you start discovering all those pieces of you that you had put away or denied or hidden from because they didn't serve you. You didn't think they served you, and you start to reclaim them. And as you reclaim all those parts, that's when I think you start stepping into being more of a whole person. So, um, I wouldn't allow myself to be sad or to complain or to whine, because that wasn't rewarded in my family. I learned pretty quickly, like, oh, I'm just going to get things done, and they're going to be so happy with me. That's how I'm going to get the love and attention I need. And that became part of my personality, and to the point where I didn't know how to be sad. Even I didn't understand the point of it, which now sounds crazy. And going, having to grieve and go through those losses reconnected me with the ability to be sad. And now I'm moved much more easily. I connect much more
Yeah.
deeply and from a more holistic place. And so I think that's, while the catalyst might be different for all of us, I think the process and the journey is pretty similar, I think.
Yeah. And I think that in so many ways too, what has been working for us is what we'll continue to do until it stops. And
Yeah.
so like the being really strong and the not whining and not complaining tends to serve other people really well sometimes, right? And it serves to a certain extent in the workplace until you start to not have the empathy, right, that other people want to see. But I think for many people it works,
Yes.
because you do, and you do fast and you do well, and but then you might hit a point where you suddenly realize that you can't escape it.
There's sort of a
Because people
shelf
have
life.
feelings.
Yes. I think there's a reason we develop our stories and our narratives, because they do help us get through a period in our lives. They do serve us. They might even save us, right? And then they stop. And I think the opportunity for us is to recognize when they're no longer working and to re-examine our stories,
Yeah.
and to continually rewrite them, as we get older.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the idea, right, of consistently questioning, right?
Well, that's what Byron
If this is
Katie
still,
says,
yeah,
right? Is it true?
question
Is
it
it
all.
true?
Is it
Is
true?
it true?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. And I have found, when you do a lot more of this kind of thought work, you start to find that it's all true. Like it's all true. But if it's all true, which of these truths would you like to pick out of this whole piece to actually help you move forward? And sometimes this other truth actually holds us back. And this one truth might be the one we take with us, like for this leg of the journey, right? And
Yeah,
then we give it up and we
that's
swap.
such a great way of it's funny, my daughter now, who's 17, she's very oriented around right and wrong, and she's always asking me these binary questions. I'm like, well, and most of the time I have this very gray answer, and I know it frustrates her because she's still in a place where she's putting things in buckets: good, bad, right, wrong. And
Yeah.
I was there, and now I realize that life is the grays. It's all true or it's all not true, right? It's subtleties, it's nuances.
Yeah. I found that, and we'll talk a little bit about this, but for me, spirituality was one of the things I was like, it's either something spiritual or it's
Yes.
not. And you need to go away to a mountain and become a hermit somewhere to be highly spiritual, or you're not. And I remember thinking, like, how do you bring along all of these things to your day to day? And it's the same as like identity. As much as we have an identity, we don't have one. And if we don't have one, then you can be whatever you want and have any identity you want, right? So you have to sometimes be able to bring these bigger concepts into the day to day in order for you to actually make it useful for you. Otherwise, they just kind of sit there as like a very conceptual idea, like it's all true. But then it's like, but how am I going to actually move forward with this? And then
Yes.
you start to get into specific things where it's like, okay, well, if that helps you to think this way, then yes, it's true. Like, go for it. But sometimes you have to live it, right?
Well, I think I wonder if that is the process, which is you become aware of a truth, but at first it feels very distant from you, and then that's how you bring it in. I mean, was it Jack Cornfield? Is it a book? He used to say, "First the ecstasy, then the laundry." Right? Like we think spirituality is this thing. It's as present in the mundane as it is about as when you have a transcendent experience.
I love that. So let's talk about spirituality. And I know that for you, at least I read in the book, that was part of some of the journey of healing and growth for you. So how do you actually see your practices show up in the workplace?
Work right now is really challenging. It's not easy. I was just speaking with my number two at work earlier today, and organizations have become a microcosm of what's happening uh, more broadly in our country and in the world. And it didn't used to be that way. And so there's a lot of tension that didn't used to be there before around diversity and identity and inclusion, and who's getting opportunities and who's not. And it tests, and being the head of HR, it's coming at me all the time. It's coming at me from the business side, from the employee side, and I'm constantly being tested. And that is the spiritual path, right? Is constantly being tested and making choices. So for me, trying to stay connected to myself, to how I feel during the difficult times, like modeling the behavior that I'm asking my employees to show up with. Like if I say, hey, we need to be resilient, am I showing resilient? We need to be empathetic. Am I being empathetic when I'm being triggered and my cup is not very full that day? I try to admit when I'm struggling too. That's been one of my biggest learnings. It's really easy to say, well, you should really do this. And you can kind of come from this holier than thou place, and that just does not work. And so I really try, like if I'm having a rough day or a rough patch, I will try to say it not in a, oh, woe is me, feel bad for me, but like, look, I'm human and I'm struggling now, and I'll get through it. Yeah. But right now I need a little support, and I need a little kindness, and I need a little empathy, and I'm going to give it to you too, so that I can model the behavior that I'm asking from them. And I think the other thing that I've really realized is, this is a generational thing or just a point in time thing. Everything and everyone is so serious right now. There's no humor, there's no levity, and sometimes I think people think about spirituality like, I'm going to go meditate. I'm going to, it's like it's just no fun, right? Yeah. And I don't think that's true. I think I try to infuse some lightheartedness in the midst of the maelstrom that's happening around us, and to embody a lightness even amidst the difficult things.
Yeah.
So
it's like,
that's how I try to do it.
So much of that is this idea of perspective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I feel
very
like
much
what I've seen for myself and what I hear from what you're saying is that, spirituality brings this sense of like, what is our place in this? Where do I belong in this organization or on this team or in this world? And how do I fit in? And a lot of that comes from like a sense of connection. But if we don't feel connected to all of this, right? The organization, the world, our place, our family, we don't really have that sense of spirituality, because it all just seems very much just like man here, woman here, we're doing all these things, versus, oh, we're just all trying to do this thing and it's not life or death, but sometimes we think it is. And it's kind of silly sometimes how we get so tripped up about all of this.
I know.
Right. And having that kind of perspective, I think, is for me what I've seen change, like releases some of the pressure that we feel on a day-to-day, but it also enables us, if you want to go very into the practical world, to think much more clearly and to make better decisions and actually use like our prefrontal cortex sometimes.
I think
Yeah.
you nailed it. It is really about connection. And all those things I try to do is to reduce the dissonance. I think, there's a proclivity for people to think of HR as like the other, the corporate, the man, and that immediately disconnects you, right? And so
Yeah.
everything I do is I talk about we, and I talk a lot about choosing courage over comfort in having the hard conversation. And I talk about how it is possible to maintain your connection and to care about the person while holding your boundaries and giving feedback that something isn't working. That is probably like, I find that in organizations where cultures are kind and nice, which is lovely, the challenge is they avoid the hard conversation and they don't hold up healthy boundaries. I've been in other cultures that are a little more aggressive, more competitive, more sharp elbowed, but not very compassionate. So it's always trying to find that middle ground. And I talk a lot about how you stay connected and have that conversation. It's not like, oh, okay, I'm going to give you some tough feedback, May. So I'm going to disconnect and I'm going to throw it over the fence and I'm just going to be a
Yeah.
jerk for a minute. It doesn't have to be that way, right?
Yeah. And I do think that the more examples people have of how to do good work in this way, the more, models of example they can reference. And I do think that a lot of it comes back from the way we were parented or raised,
Yes.
or the way that we were led in an organization and the culture that was there. So I do think that the work, right, of that HR organization in terms of building like a culture can be really healing, even at work, right? It can be
Absolutely.
hopefully some of the most healthiest relationships you do have, because there are boundaries that people enforce, and there's communication, and there's training and teaching on how to actually have some of these conversations. And I know a lot of people, when I do training, they'll always bring back to these like personal life examples of like, oh, I'm going to use this at home, because a lot of times we don't get educated on the ways to manage relationships in our home
Yeah.
life. But really, it's a lot of the same, but it's like, kind of closed in this corporate speak. But really, it's a lot of the same concepts that would help you in your personal life as well.
Well, I think that's when we started to say, I mean, I started saying bring your whole self to work back in like 2006, 2007, which is you're the same person at home and at work. Now that is clearly obvious because we're all working, from home and the office. But I think, when I graduated from college in the like mid late 80s, it was that was like dress for success, where you have to kind of put on this facade and wear those ugly skirts with the bow, and you'd have to pretend you were someone else, which is the antithesis of authenticity and the antithesis of spirituality, because you're disconnecting from who you really are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We've come so far. We should feel proud.
I know. Despite everything that's going on, I think there are still
Yes.
some good things happening in the world.
Yes.
So let's talk about, because we talk a lot about the energy of like armoring up. When I talk to a lot of folks about their own transitions, sometimes there's this idea of an either or in terms of masculine versus feminine energy. For example, they have a family, and in their personal family life, they, kind of have a lot more of that feminine energy, but in the work life, they have a lot of masculine energy. But they start
Yeah.
to see that it doesn't work completely to only be one way here, one way the other. And sometimes they bring a lot of masculine into home life, or they bring, or they're worried about bringing, some of that feminine energy into their work life. So how do you see that experience for you has been moving between these two? Because
Yeah.
when readers read your book, which they should, they'll get a sense of kind of how that has played out for you. So I won't talk about all of the things, but I'd love to hear how you've experienced it.
Yeah, we all have a blend of masculine and feminine energies and qualities within us, men and women, right? So, and it comes in different ratios for all of us. It creates our sort of personal footprint, right? I've always had I'm very comfortable in my masculine, let's say. And so for me, it was recognizing when I was leaning too far into that and I needed to rebalance and come back to some of my feminine qualities as well. And appreciate that they could be as powerful as the masculine energies. So I didn't always have to like push and will something to happen.
Yeah.
I could make space, which is more of the feminine energy. And that could be just as, if not more powerful than pushing. I always remember that parable that the sun and the wind were having a debate as to who could get this man take off his overcoat first. And the wind blew and blew and blew, and the harder he blew, the tighter the man held onto his coat. And then the sun came out and just shined, and then it got hot, and and then the man took off his coat. And I always think about that parable. If I'm pushing and I'm not getting anything, I'm like, I think I'm being the wind here. I need to shift and be the sun. Wherever your starting point is recognizing you have more tools in your toolbox available to you. That we have both the masculine and the feminine. And so I'm naturally a high energy person. I'm energized by solving big problems and getting things done. And I'm a little impatient, so I can really push. But I also love connecting and helping and supporting others, which are traditionally more feminine qualities. So the trick is how you balance those two things. I now have learned to say, because I get so excited about brainstorming and about ideas. And when you get to a certain level, people feel like they can't push back on you. So I always say, okay, I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not married to this. Push back on me, challenge me if this doesn't sound right. I'm always saying that because I have come to realize that I have a lot of voltage. And sometimes if I'm coming at people, they're like, they can't say they can't say no. There's too much coming at them. So I try to make space for others to say, I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
And that's how I've learned to kind of balance a little. I also listen a lot more. I also, because I think I've just got a greater emotional sort of agility now. If I do get triggered, which of course I do, I am less apt to go off in the minute. I'll just like kind of sit with it, tell me more, seek to understand, make a little more space. And so for me, that's how I've tried to balance the two. It's this recognition that power is really strength through softness, that being able to carry, like I said, a hard message without pulling your support for the person and showing you care about them at the same time is the balance of that masculine and the feminine. That is this dance that I think we're all always just playing with.
I love that you talk about it as the balance between the two, because I think sometimes people just want what is the right way to be versus you probably have patterns. And if you want to try to flex your whole self more, you might want to try doing a little bit different than you normally would.
Yeah.
And that might be being more, having that feminine energy come through, or some more of the masculine, because for some folks, they're always in the feminine and less in the masculine. And I love the idea. And I think it came to me as you were talking about this idea of space. So I wonder, right, if we can just advance this idea of masculine versus feminine energy and think of it as taking up space versus making space for other people, and how even in, I don't know if you've heard like of Amy Cuddy's work around like power posing.
Yeah.
It's a lot of the idea of like you take up space,
make yourself be
and
big,
it raises your testosterone level and reduces your cortisol, versus, the leaning back and the making space does seem to be a little bit more aligned with the feminine. But you need both, right? Like you can't just you can't just be like all over. You need to like let people breathe a little bit here and there. And so
recognize when you're taking space and when you're making space. Oh, I love that. I'm going to take that. I really like that
Take it.
because it's true.
Yeah.
Like I have one of my founders who I work for knows this about himself. He is
Mm.
super high energy, really smart, cuts you off, and he knows it. And sometimes he'll catch himself, but he takes up a lot of space. And I'm going to use this with him. Because he knows it. He's trying to adjust, but sometimes it's like you have to hear things in exactly the right way for it to resonate with you. So that's I really like that. That's a good
Yeah. The
one.
visual might help too, right? This idea
Yeah,
of, are
yeah,
you literally leaning forward, kind of at
yes,
someone versus letting them take it in? Yeah. And I think that when you think about co-creation, there's like the universe co-creation, and then there's like the work co-creation, but I think it comes together very nicely here. It's a balance of both. It's like saying, I'm going to do some things masculine, and I'm going to allow some things to happen. And then in the workplace, it's very much like, I'm going to present you with a few options. And then the feminine's like, I'll let you talk through and maybe decide which
that's right.
one it works.
That's
Right.
right.
And so if you only went one way, you could see why it wouldn't work, or just, I don't know what I'm doing, you decide, is also not the good path forward either. So
That's right.
I love how you can
Always the
actually like
balance.
bridge the two between these kind of meta concepts, but like how it actually shows up in work.
Very practically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to ask you just a couple more questions before we wrap this up, because I want to be cognizant of your time as well. But let's talk about what did it take for you to decide to write a book? I think we have several people here who probably have some experiences in life, some interesting things that they might want to share. They might not feel that they're the one to write a book, or that's not me. How did you come to that? And how did you start in that process?
Well, just practically, I realized I had learned a lot through, my experiences, and I didn't want to lose those because you kind of come up with these and you don't remember them if you don't write them down. So I started writing down some of the learnings, some of the insights I was having as I was, going through my losses and journaling and reading and writing and coming up with my own personal view on things. And at first I did it just for myself and also a little bit to give to my daughter because she was so young when all of this started happening. And then I started talking to my friends about these insights and like out on our hikes. And almost every time I would say something like, I realized when I made space, I, had this result. Every time they would say, oh, yeah, I do that too. Oh, I know what you mean. And I started realizing that, again, even though the specifics of my story might be different, we are all on this similar path where we're rediscovering who we really are and how maybe things we've done that really hadn't served us and how do we need to shift and change. And I started realizing that others might benefit from reading my story because it could shine a light on where they were on their path. Because when I was in it, when you're in the middle of, I just remembered thinking, I knew I guess I knew I'd get out of it, but it just felt overwhelming. And it would have been so helpful to have one of those maps that says you are here, like you're almost out of the dark forest. And that's really, I thought, if my book could provide that light, then it's worth doing. And I mean, I suppose at first I thought I'm not a writer, but then as often happens in life, a friend of mine said, hey, a friend of mine that's a writer is doing a day-long workshop. Would you like to go to it? And I was like, well, I'm not a writer, but okay. And then I went and there were like 10 of us, and her name is Laura Munson. She's this beautiful writer. She lives in Montana, and she gave us these writing prompts throughout the day. And I just started writing, and I thought, oh, well, maybe I am a writer. I don't know. And it was a multi-year I didn't just become a writer overnight. I wrote hundreds of pages, which to find my voice. But there was no narrative arc. There was no tension. It didn't hang. But I didn't see that time wasted because I was learning. I was growing through that. And then once I found my voice, I connected with a writing coach, and she helped me come up with the structure and the narrative arc and the tension and the craft of writing. And once I had that vessel, then I was free to write. And that didn't happen quickly. That was part of the process. And so I would just say, if anybody has this inkling of wanting to do something, but then there's that inner critic that's like, no, you can't do that. You've never done that. You're not a writer. You're not a whatever.
Yeah.
Just keep going. And it doesn't have to be big steps. It could be small little steps. I think, at least for me, when I've allowed myself to be paralyzed, it's because I think of the enormity of this project and I think I can't do this big thing.
Yeah.
But now I really just think about tiny little steps, tiny little moves I can make that could just chip away at it. And then even like, if I had said in 2015, 2016, I'm going to write a book, I never would have gotten there. But writing down stories and scenes and ideas and putting it away for a couple months and coming back to it and not telling myself I couldn't do it, I slowly did it. And now I believe I can do anything. Honest to God. Now I'm like, maybe I'll write a screenplay. No, a documentary. I know it sounds
I love
crazy,
that.
but
No, it's not.
Maybe. Why not?
No, it is not at all. It's very beautifully written. And I remember, because I read lots of books. And I remember thinking like, it's really well done, especially like if you're not a writer by trade or normally doing this, it's something that you realize like, wow, you can start to appreciate. It's not just the stories, but it's like the lessons and the words. It's all done very, very well. So good job. You can go write a screenplay. You can
What's
do
next?
it. What's next for you?
But we all can. That's what I'm saying. I think we stop ourselves, right?
Yes, exactly. And that's something like I remember way back, right? And my journey was like multi-passionate, but writing was a big thing for me. And it was something that I only came back to after all of these wake-up calls and losses. It was like I stopped reading. I stopped doing all this stuff at a certain period of my life because it was so not purposeful for work or something like that. Coming back to like enjoying things again and writing just for the sake of writing or being creative, I think is a whole other topic, but one that I think is really important for people to really feel alive as well. So even just getting a book out is huge because you realize, well, there was a huge part of myself that I was able to tap into.
I couldn't agree with you more. And honestly, the older I get, the more I want to live in that creative space because that's what brings me alive. That's what gives me energy and lights me up.
Yeah.
That's why Kim introduced us to each other.
Exactly.
I think we have that in common.
She somehow knew. All right. So the last question I'm going to ask you is this, and I always think this is an important thing for us to think about. So I'd love to hear your perspective, which is, what do you think you're here to learn? And what are you here to share?
I think the lesson for me in this life, which I think then is my dharma to others, is how to learn to balance and integrate the dualities in life. That just speaks to me in such a deep and personal way and keeps coming back to me in all sorts of ways, personally and professionally. I don't know if that's what we're all here for, but that has been a very big theme for me. And I feel the lessons I'm learning and that I'm trying to integrate into my work and into my life are the things that I'm trying to share with others that I am seeing people actually value. And so I think for me, it's that piece there. It's that integration, that reconciling the dualities, not allowing ourselves to get stuck in these false paradoxes where we see things that are on opposite ends of the spectrum, but really they're just sort of the part of the yin and the yang.
Well, I love that. And I want to honor you for putting a book out, for sharing so vulnerably if you guys read this. It is very vulnerable. And I think that's why it's also very compelling, because you see all the truths, right? That might be parallel to your own life in it.
Yeah.
And that is what you've done, right? So you've been able to share a piece and I think help people feel a little bit less alone on their journeys, and a little bit more connected, maybe to a whole host of folks probably who resonate with your message. So thank you so much for joining us and sharing all of your wisdom. And I can't wait to, continue our relationship and see where it takes us.
Me too. Thank you, May.
All right.
Lovely
Thank
to talk to you.
All right, so if you loved that conversation and you want to learn more about Laila's book, you can find it on Amazon. It's called Strong Like Water. I highly recommend it. It would be a great gift to the heart-centered leader in your life. And you can find her online at www.lailatarraf.com. That's LAILATARRAF.com. You can find her on LinkedIn and on Instagram. And her handle is Laila, LAILA.TARRAF. So thank you all so much for joining us today in this conversation. If you would like to hear more from different heart-centered leaders, feel free to share some people and send them my way, and I would be happy to interview them and share them on the podcast with all of you. Feel free to send a podcast request to support@mayemson.com. Have an amazing week, and I will talk to you next time. Thanks so much for joining us this week on Own Your Best Life. Make sure to subscribe to the show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts so that you'll never miss a show. And while you're at it, can you please rate and review on iTunes? I would so appreciate it. Share it with a friend, take a screenshot of it, and tag @MayEmson. This helps continue to get the word out. For more show notes and resources, check out www.mayemson.com. You'll have all the links to everything you heard here today. Thanks so much for listening. It's time to own your best life.